The freezer hummed. It stood silently in the otherwise still apartment. A social worker stood before it, with a job to do, but never expecting this. As he opened the freezer, his heart jumped, his breath caught in his throat. Inside, frozen and lifeless, lay the small bodies of Stoni Blair and Stephen Barry. Detroit, a city accustomed to hardship, gasped. This discovery, this horror, cut deep into the city's soul. This wasn't just another crime, it was pure evil. The year was 2015. The nation watched, horrified, as the details unraveled. 2 young lives extinguished. A mother, their protector, implicated. How could this happen? The question echoed in the hearts of everyone. It was a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. The unheard screams of Stoni and Stephen became a deafening roar. This tragedy demanded justice. It demanded answers. The air crackled with tension as the media descended upon the apartment complex. Cameras flashed, capturing images of grief and despair. Reporters jostled for position, hungry for any scrap of information. The community reeled, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the loss. Stoni and Stephen, forever frozen in childhood, became symbols of a system that failed them. The discovery of their bodies ignited a firestorm. It forced a city to confront its demons. It forced a nation to look in the mirror. The reflection was unsettling. The case of Stoni Blair and Stephen Barry became a tragic parable, illustrating the devastating consequences of silence and indifference. Mitchell Blair, the mother of Stoni and Stephen, was no stranger to hardship. Her life was a tangled web of poverty, abuse, and poor choices. Neighbors and social workers whispered about the chaos that seemed to follow her. Yet no one could have predicted the depths of her depravity. No one could have imagined the horror she would inflict upon her own flesh and blood. Whispers turned to hushed voices as people shared their encounters with the family. They spoke of a mother overwhelmed, a mother who seemed to have checked out. Some mentioned witnessing outbursts of anger. Others recounted tales of neglect. The warning signs were there like faint smoke signals in the night, but the cries for help, both from the children and concerned onlookers, went unanswered. The authorities were familiar with Mitchell Blair. Her name had crossed their desks before. Reports of domestic disputes, allegations of child abuse, yet nothing concrete enough to warrant removing the children. The system, bogged down by bureaucracy and limited resources, failed to connect the dots. It failed to see the full picture, the escalating danger that lurked beneath the surface. Looking back, it's easy to judge. It's easy to point fingers. But the truth is, the system is often ill-equipped to handle the complexities of such cases. The line between discipline and abuse can be blurry. The fear of tearing families apart, a valid concern, can sometimes overshadow the urgent need to protect the innocent. In the case of Stoni and Stephen, the system faltered. It faltered tragically. The investigation was a slow and painful peeling back of layers. Each layer revealed a new horror. Each detail chipped away at the last vestiges of hope. The investigators, hardened detectives who had seen their fair share of darkness, were shaken to their core. The apartment, once a presumed sanctuary, became a crime scene. The walls seemed to whisper the children's terror. Forensic teams meticulously combed through the apartment, every inch scrutinized, every surface tested. The evidence painted a gut-wrenching picture of abuse, burns, scars, malnourishment. The children's bodies bore witness to the horrors they endured. The details, too gruesome to recount in full, became a macabre jigsaw puzzle. Each piece a testament to the children's suffering. The investigators, haunted by the children's silent screams, vowed to get justice. They interviewed neighbors, teachers, and family members. They pieced together a timeline of abuse, a timeline that spanned years. The more they learned, the more their hearts ached for Stoni and Stephen. These weren't just case files. These were children robbed of their childhoods, robbed of their futures. The investigation uncovered a chilling truth. Mitchell Blair's abuse wasn't a series of isolated incidents. It was a calculated and systematic campaign of torture. The children lived in a perpetual state of fear. They were prisoners in their own home. Their mother, the one person who should have protected them, became their tormentor. The betrayal, the ultimate violation of trust, was almost too much to bear. Section 4. Justice, delayed, denied. A broken system fails again. The wheels of justice, often slow to turn, seem to grind to a halt in the case of Stoni Blair and Stephen Barry. The system, designed to protect the innocent, faltered at every turn. The warning signs, the cries for help, had been ignored. And now, 2 innocent lives were lost. The weight of this failure hung heavy in the courtroom. It permeated every aspect of the proceedings. Michelle Blair, once a shadowy figure whispered about in hushed tones, was now thrust into the spotlight. Her face, etched with a coldness that sent chills down the spines of even the most seasoned courtroom observers, became a symbol of evil. Her eyes, devoid of remorse, stared blankly ahead as the charges against her were read. Murder, torture, child abuse. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the gravity of her crimes. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence. The physical evidence was damning. The children's injuries spoke volumes. But it was the testimony of their siblings that truly broke the hearts of everyone present. Forced to bear witness to the horrors inflicted upon their brother and sister, their words painted a chilling portrait of the abuse they endured. They spoke of their mother's rage. They spoke of their own fear. Their voices, small and trembling, resonated with the pain of 1,000 unspoken truths. Throughout the trial, the defense attempted to paint Michelle Blair as a victim herself. They spoke of her troubled past. They spoke of her struggles with mental illness. But no amount of explanation could excuse the brutality of her crimes. The jury, visibly shaken by the evidence presented, reached a swift and unanimous verdict: guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom, a small measure of justice for Stoni and Stephen, but it did little to ease the pain of their loss. Section 5. Echoes of Silent Screams, the Untold Stories. The tragic case of Stoni Blair and Stephen Barry sent shockwaves far beyond the confines of the courtroom. It forced a nation to confront uncomfortable truths about its own failings. The headlines screamed their names. The news reports detailed the horrors they endured. But behind the headlines, behind the sensationalism, lay a deeper tragedy. The tragedy of countless other children suffering in silence. Stoni and Stephen's story, as horrific as it was not unique. It was a stark reminder that child abuse is a pervasive and insidious problem. It knows no socioeconomic boundaries. It lurks in the shadows of every community. Every day, children are subjected to unimaginable cruelty. They are abused by the very people who are supposed to love and protect them. Their voices, often silenced by fear or manipulation, go unheard. Their pain, hidden behind closed doors, remains invisible. The statistics are staggering. Every year, millions of children are reported as victims of abuse and neglect. And these are just the reported cases. Countless others suffer in silence. Their stories remain untold. The echoes of their silent screams reverberate throughout society. They are a deafening indictment of our collective failure to protect the most vulnerable among us. We can no longer afford to turn a blind eye to this epidemic. We can no longer allow fear, apathy, or a broken system to silence their cries for help. The time for action is now. We must shine a light on the darkness. We must give voice to the voiceless. We must demand justice for Stoni and Stephen and for all the children who suffer in silence. Section 6. Unraveling the Truth. The Investigation Deepens. The discovery of the children's bodies was only the beginning. The investigation into their deaths was a long and arduous journey. It was a journey that took investigators into the darkest corners of the human psyche. They meticulously pieced together the events that led to Stoni and Stephen's demise. Each piece of evidence, each witness testimony, brought them closer to the truth. The apartment itself told a story. It was a story of neglect, of violence, of unimaginable suffering. The walls bore the scars of past outbursts. The furniture was broken and stained. The air was thick with the stench of decay. It was a place where hope went to die. The investigators, hardened by years of experience, were visibly shaken by what they found. They had seen their fair share of crime scenes, but this one was different. This one was personal. They pored over every detail, searching for answers. They interviewed neighbors, friends, and family members. They scoured social media for clues. They left no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. The investigation revealed a pattern of abuse that had been going on for years. Stoni and Stephen had been failed by the very system that was supposed to protect them. Their cries for help had been ignored. Their suffering had been dismissed. The case files painted a grim picture of the family's history. There had been multiple reports to Child Protective Services. Neighbors had complained about the children's cries. Teachers had noticed bruises and other injuries, but for whatever reason, nothing was done. The system had failed them. The investigators were determined to ensure that this time, justice would be served. They worked tirelessly, driven by a shared sense of purpose. They owed it to Stoni and Stephen to get it right. The weight of the case was immense, but the investigators refused to be deterred. They knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. They just had to find it.